Commissioner.
So what is the result if you do cut the line? Is the shark going to be fine with a hook in its mouth and maybe a kind of a long line?
Jessica, get up here.
We're suggesting non-stainless hooks so that would rust out, but also, yes, cutting the line. Yes, they would be trailing some amount of line, but it's okay. But ultimately, the hook would rust out, and that would, for many of these cases, likely just fall out with the hook.
Anyone else? Other questions?
Yeah.
Commissioner?
So one of the questions I'll ask Jim, you seem the most knowledgeable that I know from my area, but do sharks, do they have a slime like, bonefish and barracudas and stuff like that? They do not. Okay. Then, well, the reason I was asking is, we have gone to, in all our fishing that we do, mostly fly fishing for bonefish, we never touch the fish. We have dehookers and we release the fish in the water, basically for the protection of the fish, because if you remove their slime, the sharks will get them almost immediately. The other thing that I was going to ask was about the fear for my safety clause in the rules. What are your thoughts on that, Jessica, and what would you suggest we do?
So we could remove it. This was something that y'all suggested at a previous meeting be added in there, that people release the shark immediately, as quick as possible, but also in a safe way that was safe for those shore-based shark anglers. So we added it in at your direction.
Question. And then to further my comment earlier on non-stainless hooks, it's a topic for another day, but kind of seems common sense for Florida. We're trying to protect our resources to possibly get fishermen to voluntarily use non-stainless fishing for other species as well that you may be catching and releasing. Possibly look at the manufacturers to push a non-stainless alternative, obviously for trolling and stuff like that, where you have lures that are rigged. You're typically not going to hook down deep, and you're going to be releasing those. You could keep those fish or release them, but those hooks would rust more easily. But you wouldn't want to have that for that type of a lure setup. But anytime you're bait fishing or whatever, you're tying a new hook on every time you fish. So why wouldn't you, if you catch fish that you want to release or that you have to cut that you lose and the hook is still in there, that it will corrode and be gone.
Apparently you haven't seen my tackle box, which is full of corroded, rusty hooks. Sorry. I apologize. Chairman, I do have... Jessica, have you read the recommended language that was just handed out on cut the line?
I have not. I haven't seen that.
Can somebody give that to Jessica while I ask a couple of questions? One, I am going to ask for an amendment to the proposed rule addressing the swimming out your bait and making sure that it's okay, you're regular fishing, you're not shore-based shark fishing just because you swam out your bait. As long as the diameter of the hook is, or not the diameter, the distance, opening distance is less than 1.5 inches. It just gives clarity that you're not shore-based shark fishing when you're actually just pushing your pompano baits across the breakers if you have to swim them out and you can't cast well like I can. Hearing the comments, and one of the things I want to be very thoughtful and cautious about, because Jessica, you and Melissa have done a tremendous amount of work in balancing two stakeholder groups, candidly. And the compromise, I think, that you have been able to navigate is phenomenal. So I want to be thoughtful about playing too much with with the proposed rule language, because it's a very well done process. And having sat and listened to both sides of the equation, I really want to applaud both stakeholder groups for engaging and being part of the discussion. So I do like the amendment. As it relates to just swimming out, I do want to talk a little bit about this cut the line, because the way I read this, and I wish I had some more of the shark fishermen here, and I might ask for the gentleman who does shark fish, who spoke earlier, to give me his thoughts. The way I read this, it just gives an option of, if you're unsafe, if you feel there's safety, instead of dragging the shark up, your answer is you will cut the line. And Melissa, you and Jessica both have fully engaged in this dialogue. What are your thoughts? Because it looks like to be almost a good common sense solution, but I'm reading it real quick just like you are, and I apologize about putting you on the spot.
All right, so we're over here trying to, the family feud here, we're trying to bring the answer forward here. So
I tried to talk for a while just to get
thank you, I appreciate
back.
that. Thank you for that. I think that we're okay with the cut the line. I think we have some concerns about how specifically the rule is modified. I think that we would need to work with legal on what the language looks like on the cut the line piece. I guess one of our concerns is, I guess there were some suggestions to not remove the head from the water at all. I guess that we have some concerns with, if depending on, is there chop, and you could be trying to reach down to grab the leader to cut it, and the head might come out of the water because you're trying to pull it up because you can't see where that is. So we have a little bit of concerns about the way that it's worded, amending the language that we already have. But I think that we can work with legal to get this in there.
Included my questions, so if they have questions at all.
Commissioner Kellum?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jessica and team, again, for just the hard work. And Commissioner Soul, thank you for taking your time to meet with all the stakeholder groups. I, too, am like Commissioner Soul in terms of trying to figure out a common sense mechanism. I mean, the phrase "cut the line" is a catchy phrase, but it is common sense. Cut the line. So I think that is something that we should try to figure out how we get that in there. I just want to back up to some of my earlier comments, because we heard a lot of comments about fishing on populated beaches, safety issues with not just the angler but with the general public. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands that that's not on deaf ears by any means. I think that, as you heard from some of the speakers, we heard a lot about how we've come a long way from where we were. And I think both the stakeholders, the concerned citizens about shark fishing, and the anglers have both come a long way. And that's what it sounds like came out of these 10 or so meetings that you held around the state. So I think that right there is a huge win in itself. So whatever happens, whatever the final language, if something passes, we've taken steps forward, which I think is great. So I think we need to recognize that as an industry, that's something we're working to achieve. Are we going to pass the best thing that solves all the answers? No. But are we setting the baseline to start now looking at this and addressing this down the road? Yes, I think we are. So I would love to see how we could get something in there regarding this cut the line. What I did see on Saturday was a shark that was out of the water for longer than it should have been. So I think that there should be, when we talk about this language about quick or whatever that terminology was, that immediate release of these prohibited species. I think that that you have a prohibited species before you get it to the place where I saw this nurse shark pulled to on Saturday. So that line should be, in my opinion, should be cut. How we achieve that, I'm not smart enough to know, but whatever language you all come up with, there's no reason to beach that shark if it's a prohibited species. So I would love to recommend to us commissioners that if there was some way to get to that, Mike, and you've talked more with these stakeholders, than I have. So, I think if that's a fair assessment and that's something that we could get to, I think that would be great that we get there. And I think that just on a completely separate note, I think it's great to see our young folks up here passionately speaking on an issue, whatever that issue may be. It happens to be this. So it's really neat, the young ladies that have taken time out of their day from school and stuff to speak passionately about that. I want to make sure that they continue that, because that is how things get done. Rules get changed and conservation continues to thrive because it's people with passion that want to step up. So I think it would be great, Jessica, if we could figure out a way to get this cut the line language in something and then just set this base. I think you guys have done a great job with this voluntary permit. I know we're going to amend it or we're requesting to amend it to extend the ages and everything else we've talked about. So I'm in full support of staff's recommendation plus.
So before we move it to a final action on this, I'm going to go back and review all the different proposed amendments that our commissioners have suggested and talked about. But before I do that, any other discussion or comment on this? Any other questions? Anybody? So I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong or add to the list, I heard 4 different suggestions coming from the commission with regard to suggested language changes in the final rule. First was cut the line language, and we'll come back and more specifically address that so that you're comfortable, Bud, that you understand exactly what the language is that we're talking about. The second was the size of the hook. So as we define shore-based shark fishing, there's a size of the hook requirement within that if you have a hook below that size, as I'm understanding it, that would take you out of the definition of shore-based shark fishing. The second, for folks like my fellow commissioner that can't cast very well, swimming the bait out, we'll call that the can't cast rule. Yeah, the sole. Yeah.
Sole amendment.
Just for clarity, the good news is the hook size addresses my poor casting ability. So it really is just instead of 3, it's 2, just those 2 issues.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to see him swimming from the beach with his line in his hand.
Yeah, me too.
Get past the break.
Me too. And the fourth on my list, but now we're down to 3. We'll combine those 2. I think that's a good idea. Is whether or not to include all fishermen, including those 16 and under, to be required to take the educational part of the process to get the permit. And I'm not sure if they have to have the permit or just take the educational part. I wasn't exactly clear on that. Could you clarify for us?
My view was that the best way to avoid conflict is going to be through education, and I just feel like in hunter safety we require if anybody that's going to hunt without an adult under the age of 18 has to have a hunter safety permit. Just consider it a hunter safety permit for shark fishing, and I believe that if you're under 16 and you're not going to be fishing with an adult, you should have to take it. If you're over 65, you should have to take it. It isn't anything other than educating yourself better on how to be safe and for yourself and for the people around you.
Okay, understood. But is that discussion of those 3 changes sufficient for you to understand the language that needs to be addressed?
I do, and working with staff, we can wordsmith it. My main concern is making sure that we get those amendments in the motion.
I will make that motion.
And so that's a motion to approve of the final rule in accordance with staff recommendation with those 3 changes.
Yes, with those 3 changes, yes.
It's moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Very good.
Very good.
Jessica, Melissa, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great work. So it's